Chapter 5. Accepting the Offer. The training room was amazing, and Rory wasted no time in kicking off his shoes to leap onto the thick blue mats that covered the stone floor. Oliver looked at the sliding walls that stood in the form of barn-style doors on all sides. They could be moved to mostly close in the room, leaving only inches between them, or opened up for entry and exit. From the exterior, it had looked like large sliding doors, but inside, the moving walls contained all the obvious fighting equipment, including staves, wooden swords, a modest collection of bright blades, some double-ended. There were other objects that Oliver didn't recognize, but he assumed they were used specifically for training in one of those Vigor potentials Miss Turner had mentioned. Marcel seemed right at home here, but Selina was still very uneasy. She hadn't spoken much since Oliver had emerged and told Marcel what Miss Turner had said, and she had accompanied them down the hall with her arms folded over her middle while Rory went on and on about all the things he could invent with the high-tech sci-fi resources. All his dreams could become reality. That concept was not lost on Oliver as he stepped into the training room and stood on the carved stone floor before the mats. Marcel rocked back and forth on his feet, and Rory jumped around with joy, but Selina stood off to the side and wouldn't look at any of them. "What's wrong, Selina?" asked Oliver. "I'm not supposed to be here," she groaned. Oliver could feel that she was trying not to cry. "Don't cry, Lena," he said, approaching her. She looked at him with misty eyes. "You're already doing it, Ollie," she whispered. She stopped herself and shook her head. "I really have to do it. I really have to go back in there." "Lena, I won't make you do anything you don't want to do," he promised. "It's not about wanting to," she sighed. He reached out a hand to put on her shoulder, but she straightened her back and took in a deep breath, wiping away the tear that had been about to fall. "No sense in crying about it," she said, slipping out of her tennis shoes and stepping onto the mats. "If we're going to do this, might as well get started." Rory bounded over, seemingly oblivious to Selina's emotional state. "So, what first?" he asked cheerfully. "First, Henderson, you get off the mats," she told him. He looked crushed. "What? Why?" "You're a Novig," she stated bluntly. "Novigs don't practice with practitioners. You'll get yourself killed." "I can hold my own," he stated defiantly. "I can beat Ollie in a fight, and he's done taekwondo for 2 years. She looked at him sadly. "Sorry, Rory. That's the rules." Rory paused, and for a second Oliver truly felt bad for him. He didn't feel his best friend's emotions like he did from Selina, but it didn't take the Vigor to be able to tell how disappointed Rory was. But the boy did just what Selina had done a moment ago and pulled himself together admirably. "All right then," he belted out. "Obviously, you're all too weak to handle me. Ollie, if you screw up, I'll be on the side to give you professional tips and also laugh at you when you fall on your face." "Sounds like a Saturday," said Ollie, watching sadly as Rory left the mat. Now Oliver stood in a triangle with Selina and Marcel, who had removed his sleeveless denim jacket and was cracking his big, meaty knuckles with a grin. "Please tell me I'm not going to have to fight Marcel," said Oliver. Selina chuckled. "No, definitely not yet. But we have to start somewhere, and we do that by having you practice a potential." "Okay, hold on," he said, holding up his hands. "You didn't even ask if I wanted to do this." Marcel looked nervously at Selina, but the young woman simply looked at him with a sorrowful expression. "No one asked me either, Ollie. I wish every day that I never had this, but here I am. I'm really sorry." "Don't be sorry, Selina," said Miss Turner, entering the room. Oliver turned and saw her with her hair in the same bun, but now she was wearing a skin-tight workout outfit, complete with dark blue leggings and tank top. Rory's eyes practically exploded out of his skull. She reached out with both hands, and 2 bright blades pulled themselves from the wall to her waiting fingers. She handed one to Oliver and nodded, so he activated it with that somehow familiar and comforting snap hiss. Selina's eyes grew wide when she saw how bright the white of it was, and Miss Turner gave the second blade to Selina. "There are 4 potentials you can master, Oliver," she told him. "Each of them is associated with a different color, and each one has its own demeanor. All of them have basic Vigor attributes, and you will learn those first. In time, you will choose a potential for yourself based on your aptitude." With a swift but naturally casual move, she reached out and summoned a double-bladed bright blade to her hand. It activated the moment it touched her palm. It was very ornate and unique, Oliver noticed, and its blue color shone just as brightly as his white. Marcel also held a similar-looking weapon, and his was blue as well. "Bairu," said Miss Turner. "The might. We are warriors of the highest caliber, and we train in all forms of weaponry, even modern ones. We also practice battle precognition to predict our opponent's moves and counter them." Miss Turner moved toward Marcel faster than Oliver could blink. Rory shouted in amazement when she leapt into the air and spun several times, striking with both sides of her blade repeatedly before her feet touched the mats. Marcel, equally as fast and agile, deflected every blow with his own weapon, then spun away and slid into a fighting stance. Both of their eyes glowed the same bright blue as their weapons. As though from somewhere far away, Oliver thought he heard a powerful echo, like large stones colliding in a vast open cavern. Rory hollered in astonishment. "Do that again!" he yelled. Miss Turner shook her head but smiled coyly, and both she and Marcel retracted their bright blades and turned to one another, a small nod of the head with their fingers tapping their forehead as a gesture of respect, like a salute or a bow. Then Miss Turner looked over to Selina. The young woman stiffened, but made no move to turn away. "Yindir," said the librarian. "The pain." Selina's jaw was set, and Miss Turner nodded to Marcel. The mute boy looked nervously at his schoolmate, but he activated his bright blade again and leapt, just like his Dominus had, at him. Oliver felt the wind rushing around him, just like he had the other day behind the cafe. Selina's eyes glowed yellow, and the atmosphere shifted, like he was feeling the tide rush out. Before Marcel landed, Selina's hands had moved, and 3 bright blades had launched themselves from their places on the wall and into the air around her. They snapped to life with a bright, beaming yellow. Each blade moved on its own, blocking Marcel's spinning attacks and turning the assault back on him, all without Selina ever moving from her spot. Then, to Oliver and Rory's great astonishment, Selina picked up Marcel with a twitch of her fingers, separated himself from his bright blade, which shut itself off as it left his hands, and flung him out of the training room with a flick of her wrist. "Masters of telekinesis," Miss Turner informed them. "What you just saw barely scratches the surface of what Miss Diaz can do." "Why do they call it the pain?" asked Oliver. Miss Turner was about to answer him, but Selina spoke up. "I'll tell you later, Ollie." The Dominus acquiesced to the girl's unspoken request and smiled at Marcel as he stepped back into the training room, rubbing his head with a big goofy grin on his face. He spoke to Selina with his hands very happily, but Selina gave him a weak, pained smile and looked away. Marcel seemed disappointed. "There are 2 other potentials, and the next one is not represented here," continued Miss Turner. "Next is Grendu, the Valor. It is a combination of the might and the pain, a balance between the 2. Balance is difficult when it comes to the potentials. That is why the Veros practice only Bairu and Grendu." "Who are the Veros?" "We are committed to protecting peace, security, and freedom," said Miss Turner. "Our sworn enemy is the Vice. It is they who practice Yindir and Razir." "What's Razir?" A familiar, cheerful voice came from just outside the training room. "That would be where I come in, Mr. Byrne." Oliver and Rory both spun and looked with wide eyes as Mr. Bates stepped in through one side. He was dressed as usual, in business casual attire with the vest over top for good measure. In his hands was another bright blade, though it looked much simpler than the ones held by Miss Turner and Marcel. The 2 practitioners of the might stiffened at his entrance. Miss Turner gave him a curt nod. "Jackson," she greeted. He gave back a nod of his own and flashed a dashing smile. "Holly?" "You 2 know each other?" asked Rory. "For some time, yes," said Mr. Bates. "It's complicated," said Miss Turner. Rory looked over at Oliver with a mischievous grin. Miss Turner scowled, and Marcel bristled at the unsaid suggestion. "Nonetheless, Holly, I'm much obliged for your call. I've been eager to begin your training for some time, Oliver." Oliver gave Mr. Bates a strange look as he approached. "Which potential are you?" Mr. Bates seemed to flex suddenly, and Oliver felt deep down a primal compulsion rear its ugly head. He knew the moment Mr. Bates pressed the button and let his crimson-red bright blade snap to life what Razir was. He was in front of Oliver in the blink of an eye, the glowing red blade pointed at Oliver's chest. "The Fury!" growled Mr. Bates, his teeth grinding together. Oliver began to sweat, and the room became deathly quiet. And what is that one for?" The red bright blade retracted, and Mr. Bates's countenance changed to be a little more like his cheerful self. Oliver just then noticed that he'd been gripping his own weapon tightly in both hands, holding it in front of him, between himself and the perceived threat. It had stayed white this whole time. "Razia is the natural opposition to Bairu," Mr. Bates explained. "Instead of feeding on your willpower and courage, Razia uses your anger to fuel immeasurable violence against your enemies. It is doubtless the most reliable and easily practiced of all the potentials." "And that is why it is weaker," Miss Turner was quick to interject. "But you must still learn of it to choose properly," Mr. Bates argued while speaking to Oliver. "Without being consumed by it," said Miss Turner. "Unless you must do so to save your own life, by turning yourself into a feral monster." Mr. Bates turned to Miss Turner, and Marcel stepped up next to her protectively. Bates cocked his head. "Miss Turner, do you mind?" "Slightly." "Well then, shall I look forward to your interference when it comes time to educate my adept?" "Assuming he is your adept, no," Turner said to him. "But that hasn't been decided yet." Mr. Bates glared at her, and Oliver felt that anger swelling up in him. Everyone, including Selina, felt the rising tension, and even Rory could tell things were getting dicey. "Oh, don't fight Mommy and Daddy!" Rory hollered. At this, Mr. Bates calmed himself, clipped his bright blade to his belt, and put his hands into his pockets with his thumbs hanging out. "Righto. I shall see you for in class on Monday. We can talk more then. Enjoy the remainder of your day. I shall return another time." As he left, Oliver turned back to the others. "So, if you're the Veros, then Mr. Bates?" "Like I said," Miss Turner told him, "it's complicated, but it's safe to assume he is on the side of the Vice." "But not the Venators?" "The Venators are an extremist group of Vice," she said. "The others, the ones Mr. Bates is primarily associated with, are called the Vigilants." Oliver raised an eyebrow. "But you still don't like him?" Miss Turner grimaced. He has his uses." "That's not something the good guys usually say," Rory pointed out from the sidelines. Miss Turner seemed to take his point, but she moved on and turned to fully face Oliver. "Oliver Byrne," she said, and the way she said it made him straighten up. "Now is the time you decide if you want to proceed or to back out. If you leave, I believe you will be in grave danger from the Venators, and we will do our best to protect you. At any time, you may choose to return here and begin your training. However, if you stay, you will be committing yourself to the Veros Fellowship from this time forth. You will be our brother, and we will be your family. Your duty will be first to the innocent, secondly to our fellowship, and to yourself last. Do you accept this offer?" Rory was looking at him with amazement in his eyes, holding his breath to see what Oliver would do. It was at this moment that Oliver realized, this is it. This is how I reach my great destiny. It starts here. He smiled, held his bright blade up like a knight, and nodded. "I accept this offer, Dominus. Then I, Holly Turner, champion of the Veros, do hereby swear to train and guide you in the ways of truth, justice, peace, might, and valor. All life is sacred and worthy of defense. The vigor is pure, and its potentials lead to balance. Your first duty is now to the innocent, and then to the fellowship, and then to yourself. In battle may you find courage. In victory may you find benevolence. In death may you find peace." When she had finished the recitation of the creed, Veros champion and unassuming librarian Holly Turner stepped back. Adept Marcel ignited his bright blade and angled his body toward the newbie. "Then, Apprentice Oliver," said his new teacher, "we will begin now.